All right, back to answer some more asks. Hiya, have you seen the new promo for Carol's comeback? I don't feel good about it, haha. They're making it look like Carol is going to be canon or something, but the title, The Book of Carol, doesn't sound so positive to me either. I have a feeling they're killing her off in that season. That's interesting. I actually haven't heard that from anyone else. Is there a symbolism that points to this? I don't want her dead, honestly. She's such an important person to Daryl, but I also don't want them to be together either. It gives me the ick because I always saw them sibling, older sister, younger brother thing. Yeah, I totally agree. Well, I don't think that they're going to kill her off, so I actually think that's interesting. I hadn't heard anyone talk about that being negative for Carol, but that's kind of interesting. I'll have to think about that more. Overall, I don't really think they're going to kill her off because I agree that she's a really important character. And I think that she's got a lot more story to tell. For one thing, I think before anybody gets killed off, they are going to get her back together with Ezekiel. I mean, despite what certain shippers don't want to see, they went out of their way to show that Ezekiel is her soulmate. It is not Daryl. Or if you want to call her and Daryl soulmates, it's just on a platonic, we're always going to have each other's back sort of level, okay, but not a romantic one. And so I think that she will eventually get back together with Zeke, and I think that she's going to have a big arc during the CRM war. So yeah, I agree. I could actually see them killing her off at the very end of things. Like, I've thought about that more than once. Especially given some of the things she's done, like killing Karen and David and things like that. Much like Negan, she's done some pretty bad things, and her redemption could very easily come from sacrificing herself so that people like Daryl and Team Family could live. But if they were going to do that, I think it would be at the very end of everything. Like, once the CRM war has been fought and they're no longer doing much with the Walking Dead universe, and, you know, it's really completely done with the storytelling, then I could see them doing that, but not yet. It's too early. So yeah, I mean, obviously this is a question that I've gotten a lot of, is the Book of Carol thing, but I'm genuinely interested to see where they go with it and to see what we're going to learn about her and to see how she and Daryl come back together. I mean, I'm assuming she'll go to France, but I mean, people keep asking too, well, if Daryl ended up in France, what are the chances on top of that Carol ends up in France? And I don't know. I think they've laid it out in such a way that it is plausible. If she goes and finds how he got there, the boat he was on, then she may just follow him, and that actually makes plenty of sense. I did have the thought, and it's really mostly a funny, jokey sort of thought, that what if Daryl just takes Laurent and gets on the boat anyway? I don't think he'll do that, but if he ends up landing in the same place, then he could run into Carol that way. So anyway, it would be funny if season 2 were not in France, but we already kind of know that it is, because they've been filming at the Louvre and that sort of thing. So obviously that's not the case, but I do agree that they're not going to be together, and they have established it as either a brother-sister or a mother-son relationship. They've done that many times, and it's so bizarre to me, because I literally had a caroler talk to me about how Norman confirmed that Daryl and Carol were romantic in an interview. And I said, okay, well, can you show me that interview? Because I have not seen this interview. And the one that they showed me was the one from season 7, after they kind of reunited at the cabin. And in that interview, Norman says that from Daryl's point of view, it's like, Mommy, why did you leave me? So they use an interview where Daryl literally calls her Mommy and say that it's romantic. And that's so bizarre to me that they think that. And yeah, kind of ick, kind of gross. So, you know, despite what the other ships say and think, they've gone out of their way to show that Daryl and Carol are not romantic. They're never going to be romantic. And honestly, several people with the show have confirmed it. They haven't said it in a super straightforward way, like, no, Daryl and Carol will not be romantic. They haven't said that, but they have all but said that. So there are 2 times that I can think of. One is Angela Kang, who is the showrunner, who wrote Still, so that's very important. And it was, I don't remember which episode it was after, but it was in one of the more recent seasons, like season 10 or season 11, in the Talking Dead after the show. They had someone come on and ask specifically if Daryl and Carol will ever get together. And I was surprised that they let that question through. It's something that they usually avoid. Now, Angela Kang, she obviously didn't want to answer it in a straightforward way, because she didn't want to alienate people like the carolers. She didn't want to offend people. But the answer was pretty clear. I mean, she was going, Well, you know, they have a really close relationship and they're always going to have each other's backs, but you might just have to enjoy their relationship in other ways. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, and I'm paraphrasing. That's not exactly what she said, but that was the gist of it. So she didn't actually say no, and that's true, but she pretty much said no. And I was going, okay, how can you watch that and still think that's where they're going with it? Michael Cudlitz did the same thing. He was on a podcast for the show. I used to listen to a podcast about The Walking Dead, and I don't know if it's defunct or if I just don't follow the podcast anymore. It wasn't great. They would usually just interview actors who had been on the show, and so some of them that I liked, I wanted to see. Like, they had one where they interviewed the guy that played Simon, and they actually did interview the woman that played Dawn, and I listened to hers, but they didn't actually talk about the show much. They kind of focused more on the actor and their acting career and how they got to have the part, and that's all great. It's kind of fun, but it just didn't hold my attention. They weren't really talking about the actual show or the plot or the characters all that much. Anyway, but there was one that Michael Cudlitz did, and he was asked about it there, about people who believe Daryl and Carol are going to get together. And he said, well, that's their prerogative to believe that. And if they want to interpret the show that way, I'm not going to rain on their parade, pretty much. But that is their interpretation of it. So, again, that's him saying, without saying, that that's not where the show's going with it. But if they want to ship that, that's fine. You know, so, and he's not going to stomp all over their belief system, you know. So again, people who are close with the show, people who do know where it's going and are behind the camera and familiar with the storytelling, have pretty much confirmed that Daryl and Carol are not going to be a thing. So anyway, I'm sorry, that was a huge tangent, but just to point out that you're right, there is an ick factor because they have established them as a platonic relationship, and it would be weird now if they suddenly became romantic. And I don't think we need to worry about that. Just because they're calling it the Book of Carol doesn't mean that that's where they're going with it. It's something else. It's something to do with her. They're going to reveal more. She's going to be in it, and they're wanting to tell us what to expect, but it's not, we shouldn't be expecting romance, in my opinion. So anyway, I hope that helps. Next one. Wait a minute. Rick gives Carl the sheriff's hat and tells him because he was shot, he's in the club now, or something like that. He then playfully puts the hat on Beth, which we always saw as a sign that she also survived her gunshot wound. Didn't Jude also get shot and survive? Yes. Or am I remembering things wrong? No, you're not. If so, she's the only other person to wear the hat, except for RJ maybe, who gets shot and survives. Which would mean that if Beth is really dead, then they broke the pattern. Yes. Thank you. This is the point. They establish patterns. Okay, guys, we're not just looking for symbolism because we think it's cool or something. I mean, we do, but it's because it establishes a pattern. Okay, and another way that I can show this is through Glenn's death fake out in season 6. We saw a lot of the same symbolism around him as around Beth, and he even had a lot of her dialogue. He said everyone's got a job to do. Okay, he said a bunch of things like that. And I literally put, and I posted this on my account, if Glenn is dead, TD is screwed, because it's all the same symbolism that was around Beth. So back in season 6, I didn't think he was dead at all. I really thought he was alive and it was going to be fine, but I was going, if I'm wrong about that, and if Glenn turns out to really be dead, then that means Beth is dead too, because it's all the same symbolism. It's all the same dialogue. It's all the same stuff. And guess what? He was alive. Which means Beth also has to be alive. Now, when Glenn actually did die, a little while after that, none of that symbolism was present. They did not have it around him when Negan actually killed him. So it's the same thing with the sheriff's hat. And you're right, when Judith was shot in this last season, the difference was she was not shot in the head, but Rick wasn't either. So Carl just so happened to have been shot in the head and the eye, but that's because that came directly from the comic books. Rick was not shot in the head or the eye, though, but the point is they all had gunshot wounds that were really darn near fatal, but then they ended up surviving. So yeah, the fact that Beth had one too and the sheriff's hat was on her head, that's a big indication that she is alive and well somewhere. So, and I've got, let me let you in on a little secret here when you talk about how that would mean that they'd broken the pattern. Here it is. Gimple does not break pattern. Ever. He doesn't. Never once have I seen him do it. So the pattern is there and it's there for a reason. And you are picking up on it. Kudos to you. Good job. Okay. I have been watching your Ask videos right now. because it's really comforting through this vindication I've been seeing all over Tumblr. I'm a lurker anon with a really long ask from your ask video number 13, LOL. They really seem to be promoting the next season as if the other ship is happening, and I'm a little worried because we haven't heard anything that pertains to Beth so far, aside from the symbolism. I have a feeling if ever Beth would actually be revealed to be alive, she'd be on Rick and Michonne's series. I mean, the title says it all. I'm really hoping. Anyway, just wanted to let you know your videos are really comforting, especially right now. Aw, thank you. I'm glad that they're comforting. And thank you for the asks. I really appreciate them. You know, we keep saying that she might be in one of the other spinoffs, like she might show up there first, and that would actually be really good marketing for season 2 of Daryl Dixon, because once people realize she's alive, they're going to want to go see what Daryl's up to and how he's going to find out that she's alive. So I kind of hope they do that too, not only because we'd see her sooner, but it would make things really, really interesting. But yeah, I mean, I've talked a lot about Fear the Walking Dead because we have Troy returning there and we've had Madison return there. So she could show up there. And there has been a lot of TD symbolism over the last season or two, especially in Fear. Okay, we've seen a lot of it. But yeah, I would be totally down with her being in Rick and Michonne's spinoff as well. One thing I will say is that I've seen symbolism about her returning with Rick, and I've also seen symbolism that suggests she'll return independent of him. So it's really hard to know which one it will be. You know, people ask me a lot, will she know that Rick's alive? Will Rick know that she is alive? If they're both inside the CRM somewhere, have they crossed paths? I honestly don't know. I mean, it could go either way. I think it could be that they know about each other. I think that's, at least it's plausible, but they also may not. I think it could be that she was once inside the CRM organization and now she's come out of it and is working against it from the outside. But again, we just don't know. We don't know what the timeline will be. And it could be that at some point she does know about Rick, and it's, you know, before that, another point she doesn't know about Rick, and that's why we're getting all this symbolism, because they're foreshadowing different events in the timeline, and we don't know. We don't know how it's going to turn out. But I agree. The Rick and Michonne series is called The Ones Who Live, and so yeah, it would make perfect sense if she showed up there. I will say that that is a Michonne line. Michonne did say, "We're the ones who live," so that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be in that spinoff, because it is very much a Rick and Michonne line, but that doesn't mean she won't be either. It could be either way. So yeah, I would love it if she was revealed on the Rick and Michonne show, and I think that would make things super fun and super interesting. So yeah, I'm with you. Let's hope that happens. Hi, I'm sure this has already been picked up on, but Bessie is a nickname for someone called Elizabeth, and so Beth is short for Elizabeth. Yeah. In episode, I think that was episode 5, right? The guy who owned the radio called it Bessie. And yeah, maybe I didn't give that the attention that it needed. I kind of just glossed over it and was like, oh yeah, a name for Beth. But you're right. Like, and I always go back to this. People who are skeptical like to say, yeah, but you're reading too much into that, and it's just something they said. With any other show, that might be true, and in reality, that might be true. But these writers do not put anything in the show unless it means something. Okay, we've seen that time and time and time again, and they've even told us that. They've told us to look for Easter eggs because they purposely put things like this into the show. And the radio guy smacking the radio on the top and going, "Come on, Bessie." I mean, it's not like that moved the plot forward. I mean, there was no reason to put that in. That would have been a purposeful choice. And they used a name that sounded like Beth. And if you think about that, it's really interesting because that was right before we learned that someone had returned. Now, again, because Carol said it on the radio, someone came back, right? And we didn't hear who it was. Now, again, I don't think she was talking about Beth. Really, in the plot, I think it's something else. But we hear the name Bessie followed by come back. I mean, symbolically, they're telling us that Bessie is about to come back. Like, that's what that is, even if in the plot that's not what it ends up being. So that's why we always pay attention to dialogue and what it's associated with and who's talking about it and what symbols are in the background while they're saying it, because the writers really do think about all of these things, and they do tend to be purposeful and important. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. All right, last one for today. Shit, I wasn't going to send this message, but I just took a detour to Daryl Dixon tags here on Tumblr and did a little scroll. I love the little scroll. I just realized carolers will be having a hard time processing this last episode because of all the googly eyes Daryl has been giving Isabel and the line where Carol said she was looking for her friend Daryl. I think that cements the non-romantic dynamic they've always had if they are paying attention at all. I agree. I also realized why some people are hating on Carol is because of these shippers. If I don't read anything from them online, I love Carol just fine. Yeah, me too. I was talking about that before. I'm sorry if I sound so vindictive. They're just so mean to other ships and now to Isabel. She doesn't deserve it. She can be a little shady at times, but Carol ain't a saint either. None of them are. It's fucking bizarre. All I ever want was for Daryl to be happy in whatever way the showrunner decides. But I am hoping they bring Beth back for real because Daryl deserves a miracle of his own. I completely agree. Agree with everything he said. And it's too bad because you know that not only Isabel, unfortunately, but Clement Posey is going to end up getting a lot of hate over it, and it's really, really sad. It's too bad that they act that way because I'm not going to remember her name in real life now, but the actress that played Leah went through that. And, you know, we didn't like Leah. We knew she was toxic in the show, so I don't know that we had tons and tons of sympathy about it, but I did listen to a few interviews from her where she said she was warned about the shippers. She was warned that there would be some trolls about this and that she was going to be in the hot seat, she was going to be under the microscope, and even knowing that, even being warned and trying to prepare for it, she was still really shocked at the level of hate she got from the carolers. So you're right, they can be very, very mean, and it's unfortunate. But, you know, there's not really much that can be done about it. We just kind of got to focus on the good things and not listen to them. But I like that you said all you ever wanted was for Daryl to be happy in whatever way the showrunner decides. So I'm assuming that means you're okay if it ends up being him and Isabel, but of course hoping for Beth. But the thing is, like I've said this before, I think most fans feel that same way. If he was going to get together with Carol, okay, they would have been okay with that. And, you know, anytime I say this, I always get pushback from it, and I think it's mostly from carolers who are trolling my posts. But I am telling you, I had quite a few people that I saw, and not necessarily talk to me directly, but I would look at conversations online and see people posting who they didn't like Beth and Daryl at first because maybe they shipped Daryl and Carol, and they would be like, no, not Beth, I want him to be with Carol. And then they would come back around and say, well, okay, she's not that bad, I guess, as long as he's happy. Okay, so my point is that most of the fandom feels that way. They just want him to find happiness. And them doing what they're doing in this first season where he says, you know, someone says something about we all have someone waiting for us and his head goes down. Okay, that's just making it worse. We can see how lonely he is and that he wants some sort of companionship. So the shippers aside, who are very toxic, 99% of the fandom is going to be right on board when Beth comes back. Okay, they really are. And they would probably, I think you're right, that they would be on board with anybody that he's going to find happiness with. If they had ever decided to do it with Carol, then they would have been okay with that. If they decided to do it with Isabel, they would be okay with that. They just want Daryl to find some happiness. But like you, I hope that it will be Beth, and I really do think that it will be, because I don't think they would be using all of the symbolism and replaying what happened in season 5 with Daryl and Carol and Consumed if it wasn't going to be Beth. So, but I agree. They need to bring Beth back because Daryl deserves it. He deserves her, and he needs her, and we all want to see that happen. So thank you so much for that ask. I completely agree. And you're not being vindictive. This is the place you can vent if you want to, because I know we all have to deal with the trolls online, and it's not always fun. So, all right, that is all I have for today, but I should be back pretty soon with more. Please keep sending in your questions. I love answering them. And yeah, we will just keep going. I think we are getting Fear the Walking Dead next, but I'm not sure when it's premiering. I know it's not too far away. So, all right. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.